The chaos began inside FCI Fort Dix on a night that was supposed to be uneventful. A cold wind pressed against the dorm windows, the hallways were unusually quiet, and most inmates were already lying in their bunks. Nothing suggested history was about to be made. But inside Dorm Block D East, a different kind of silence was building. A tense, heavy silence. The kind that only comes before a disaster. Somewhere near the back of the unit, hidden between stacked mattresses and dim shadows, an inmate quietly lifted an illegal cell phone. The glow from the screen illuminated his hand as he whispered, "Keep your voice low. Just film. Don't stop." And that was the moment everything spiraled. Because the man pacing in front of that shaky camera, the man wiping sweat from his face, the man unraveling in real time, was Sean Diddy Combs. The footage showed him moving back and forth like he was trying to outrun his thoughts. He pressed both hands into his scalp, muttering words the camera struggled to catch. His breathing was fast, panicked, like someone who had finally lost control of the story he'd been trying to hold together. Then suddenly he raised his head. His eyes were red, his voice was unstable, and he said the one sentence that would end every legal argument he had left. They were right. Everything they said, they were right. The inmate filming froze. Someone behind him whispered sharply to stop recording, but nobody stopped anything. The camera stayed up. The confession kept flowing. Diddy pressed his hands to his face, shaking. "When the truth comes out," he choked, "they're gonna bury me alive." Those words were all it took. All the silence ended. All the fear became real. Because this wasn't a rumor anymore. This wasn't speculation. This was a recorded confession, made inside a federal prison on an illegal device during an ongoing investigation. Within minutes, the clip left the dorm. Within hours, it left the prison. And by morning, the entire world had watched it. The video exploded across every platform. Telegram, X, Instagram, news outlets, courtroom analysts, federal watchdog channels. Former inmates confirmed the background instantly. Guards privately admitted the lighting and layout matched D East exactly. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Legal experts labeled it a self-incriminating meltdown. Journalists called it the most damaging leak yet. Federal authorities called it grounds for immediate judicial review. Because the judge had already given Diddy warnings, already placed him under enhanced scrutiny, already stated that any new violation or evidence undermining his claims could lead to a harsher sentence. This wasn't just new evidence. This wasn't just a violation. This was the one thing Diddy never expected to leak: his private collapse. By sunrise, the Bureau of Prisons launched an emergency review. Officers tore through cells. Marshals were dispatched. The warden was summoned out of bed for a 5 a.m. briefing. Diddy didn't even make it to breakfast. Guards entered his unit without a word. Bird shackled him and walked him through the silent halls toward administrative custody. He kept insisting the video was manipulated, twisted, taken out of context. But his voice trembled. His hands shook. His eyes wouldn't stop darting around like he already knew the truth. There was no walking away from this one. Waiting for him in the admin wing were 3 federal marshals, arms crossed, faces unreadable. One of them slid a document across the table. Diddy stared at the top line. Emergency judicial order. Mandatory sentencing review. The hearing was set for the same morning. No delays, no appeals, no excuses. And word spread fast. By the time the van transported him to the courthouse, reporters were already fighting for position. Lawyers arrived in a panic. Court deputies whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Because everyone knew what this meant. When a judge calls an emergency sentencing review this fast, it's not for clarification. It's for punishment. As the courtroom doors opened and Diddy was led inside, shackles rattling, all eyes lifted toward him. Not with curiosity, but with the kind of cold silence reserved for someone whose fate has already been decided. He didn't smirk. He didn't posture. He didn't speak. For the first time since his arrest, he looked like a man who understood. This is the moment everything ends. The courtroom felt different when Diddy was brought in. Everyone sensed it. Everyone felt the weight in the air. Everyone understood that this wasn't a routine hearing or a procedural review or a simple reprimand. This was the kind of silence that comes before a storm so violent it can't be stopped. Every reporter leaned forward. Every legal analyst lifted their eyes. Every guard stood a little straight. Diddy took his seat at the defense table, and for the first time in months, he didn't try to perform. Gone was the forced confidence. Gone was the smirk. Gone was the defiance. He stared at the table, wrists shaking in the cuffs. His attorney leaned toward him and whispered, "Do not speak. Whatever you do, let me handle this." But it didn't matter. Nothing he said would change what was about to happen, because when the door behind the bench opened and the judge stepped out, the entire room froze. She didn't look angry. She didn't look frustrated. She looked offended. A kind of cold, controlled fury radiated from her presence, the kind of fury judges only show when they believe someone has mocked their court. She sat down slowly, placed her glasses on, and turned her eyes toward Diddy. He didn't look back. "Mr. Combs," she began, her voice sharp and unwavering, "I warned you, explicitly, repeatedly, and in unmistakably clear terms." She paused, letting the silence deepen. "I told you that any further misconduct, any additional violation, and any new evidence contradicting your testimony would result in immediate and severe sentencing consequences." The courtroom remained so silent that even the faint buzz of the overhead lights felt loud. The judge continued, "And yet, despite those warnings, despite the presence of federal oversight, despite having every opportunity to adhere to the rules of this institution," she lowered her voice, "you have produced the most damning piece of evidence this court has seen to date." Someone in the gallery softly exhaled. Diddy's attorney pressed his lips together, already defeated. The judge picked up a printed transcript of the leaked video, each line of dialogue highlighted in yellow. "This," she said, tapping the paper, "is not an edited clip. This is not misinformation. This is not fabricated. This is a direct recording of your own statements from within your own housing unit on an illegal device." She leaned forward. "And it is plainly a confession." Diddy squeezed his hands together tightly. His head dropped lower. His attorney stood. "Your Honor, if I may, my client was under emotional distress. This was not—" "No," the judge cut in sharply. "Sit down." He sat. The judge's eyes returned to Diddy. "You were found pacing, agitated, expressing recognition that the allegations against you were legitimate. You stated on camera that when the truth comes out, they are going to bury me alive." Gasps rippled across the room, even though everyone had already heard the line online. Hearing it from the judge in that cold tone made it feel fatal. The judge closed the transcript, slowly, deliberately. "That statement alone, Mr. Combs, destroys any credibility you had left." The prosecutor rose next. Even he seemed shocked by how quickly and aggressively the court was moving. "Your Honor," he began, "the government submits that the defendant's repeated violations, the escalation of contraband use, and now this self-incriminating video constitute a clear and present danger to the integrity of the judicial process." He looked directly at Diddy. "Mr. Combs has shown disregard for the law, disregard for the court, and disregard for the truth." The prosecutor set down a folder, thick, heavy, full. "We are requesting an immediate elevation of his sentence to the maximum term permissible, effective today." A whisper rippled through the room. Life, without parole. Everyone knew that's what he meant. Diddy's attorney stood again, desperate this time. "Your Honor, this is impulsive. This is emotionally charged. My client has a right to defend—" "He has exercised that right," the judge replied, her tone like steel, "and he has violated every condition of it." Her gaze returned to Diddy. "Mr. Combs, this court is not interested in excuses. This court is not moved by emotional outbursts. This court is not swayed by fame, influence, or public pressure." Her voice dropped into something even colder. "What I see before me today is a man who has repeatedly lied under oath, manipulated the system, violated institutional security, and now, finally, revealed his own guilt." Diddy's chest rose sharply. For a moment it looked like he might speak, but his attorney placed a hand over his wrist, silently begging him not to. The judge didn't look away. Mr. Combs, before I proceed with final sentencing, her eyes hardened, you may say exactly one thing to this court, if you choose. A murmur broke out. Everyone leaned forward. Diddy swallowed. His throat tightened. He lifted his head just slightly, eyes glossy, jaw clenched, shoulders trembling. This was his last chance, his final moment before the hammer fell. But when he opened his mouth, no sound came out, just air, just breath, just fear. Then he closed his mouth again, but bam, gum, and bowed his head. The judge nodded once. So be it. The silence after Diddy's refusal to speak wasn't ordinary. It wasn't polite. It wasn't tentative. It was the kind of silence that presses on your chest, makes your lungs feel heavy, and leaves your soul raw. Everyone in the courtroom could feel it. Reporters, marshals, prosecutors, clerks, even the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The judge adjusted her papers slowly, deliberately, letting every second stretch longer than the one before. The weight of her gaze pressed down on Diddy like iron chains, sharper and colder than any steel restraint he wore. Mr. Combs, she said finally, her voice cutting through the thick quiet like a blade, the federal system operates on law, order, and integrity. It does not bend for wealth. It does not yield for influence. It does not allow exceptions for celebrity status. Diddy's hands twitched in his cuffs. He had heard it before, in speeches, in press releases, in whispers from his attorney. But hearing it here from this bench made it undeniable. This was real. This was final. The footage leaked from Fort Dix, the judge continued, documents a series of events that your incarceration was meant to prevent. Unauthorized access, unsupervised movement, interaction with unknown parties, and deliberate concealment. These are not minor infractions. These are not mistakes. These are calculated breaches that compromise the authority of this court, the credibility of the Bureau of Prisons, and the very structure of federal law. Diddy's chest rose and fell unevenly. His jaw was tight. His eyes flicked briefly toward the gallery, searching, pleading, but no one could help him. No one. The judge's voice dropped lower, steady, merciless. When an inmate undermines the integrity of the system in this manner, the court has no choice but to respond decisively. Weakness cannot be perceived. Lax enforcement cannot be tolerated. The public trust must be restored. Diddy's attorney leaned forward, whispering, "Your Honor, please, he has complied since the videos." The judge lifted a single hand, stopping him instantly. "No," she said, her eyes did not waver. "The compliance that comes after exposure is irrelevant. The damage has been done. The violation has occurred. The court cannot ignore this, and I will not." The silence returned, heavier now, thicker, as if the entire room had been submerged in ice. "Therefore," the judge said, voice deliberate, measured, "the court finds it necessary to escalate the severity of the sentence imposed upon you, effective immediately." Diddy's stomach twisted. He felt as if the floor had dropped from under him. "Your original sentence," she continued, "was 50 years, a term designed to reflect the gravity of your offenses while allowing for a measure of accountability. That sentence is no longer sufficient given your recent conduct, the public dissemination of unauthorized footage, and the undermining of institutional integrity." The room seemed to shrink around him. He could hear every shuffle, every intake of breath, every subtle click of a pen on a desk. "The court," she said, "after reviewing all evidence, including the 2 leaked videos, finds that your actions constitute a fundamental violation of the conditions of your confinement. Consequently," her eyes locked on Diddy's, cold and unflinching, "the court hereby increases your sentence to life imprisonment, effective immediately, without the possibility of appeal." Time froze. The words landed like a hammer striking steel. Diddy's hands shook violently. His legs buckled slightly under the weight of reality. The marshal's grip tightened instantly, steadying him. The courtroom collectively exhaled, a gasp barely audible, but it carried the weight of thousands of thoughts crashing into one moment. The judge wasn't finished. She continued, her voice icy and sharp. "You are denied the right to appeal this modification. Your actions have not only disrespected the law, but they have eroded public trust. endangered institutional credibility, and demonstrated deliberate non-compliance with federal authority. Diddy's knees gave way. His attorney grabbed him, whispering again, though he could barely meet the words. His world had shrunk into the small space of chains, cuffs, and trembling muscles. He looked up just once, a fleeting glance at the press, at the gallery, at the judge who had just sealed his fate, and saw not anger, not vindictiveness, not cruelty, but absolute resolve. A resolve that left no room for negotiation, no room for mercy, no room for hope. The marshal guided him toward the exit. Each step echoed like a death knell, loud in the hollow spaces of the courtroom. Reporters' cameras flashed, but Diddy did not lift his head. His eyes remained fixed on the floor, and as the doors swung closed behind him, the silence that followed was deafening. The man who once commanded stages, influenced millions, and moved through life with a sense of untouchable power now walked into a future that had been irrevocably altered. A life sentence, without parole, immediate, unforgiving. The leaked videos hadn't just embarrassed him. They hadn't just disrupted the prison system. They hadn't just caused a scandal. They had ended his life as he knew it. Outside SDNY court, chaos had already taken hold. The moment the doors swung shut behind Diddy, the world reacted in real time. Reporters shouted into microphones, cameras flashed ceaselessly, and social media erupted into a frenzy. Twitter, X, TikTok, Instagram, every platform shook under the weight of the announcement. Diddy sentenced to life, no parole. Videos leaked. Integrity collapsed. Fort Dix scandal hits federal system. By the time the convoy carrying Diddy returned to Fort Dix, the prison itself felt different. Officers walked faster, their eyes sharper, their postures rigid. Supervisors barked orders like a machine fueled by adrenaline and fear. Every corner was monitored more strictly. Every inmate questioned, every log reviewed, every access scrutinized. Inside, Diddy was silent. No words escaped his lips. He could feel the weight of every eye watching him, every rumor traveling faster than sound, every judgment closing in like a tightening vice. For the first time, wealth, influence, and fame were meaningless. Inside those walls, chains and cold stares replaced spotlight and applause. By noon, the leaked videos had been viewed over 200 million times globally. Legal analysts dissected every frame. Political commentators debated the integrity of the Bureau of Prisons. Talk shows replayed the clips endlessly, circling Diddy adjusting his jacket, slipping into corners, whispering off camera. Conspiracy theories multiplied like wildfire. Was he receiving special treatment? Was someone protecting him? Was there corruption at the highest levels of the federal prison system? Fort Dix's internal chaos mirrored the global storm. Wardens were summoned for emergency briefings. Federal investigators demanded access to security logs, staff interviews, and video archives. Each officer who had interacted with Diddy over the past week was interrogated. Every chain of command was scrutinized. Meanwhile, the public's outrage didn't wane, it grew. Celebrities, influencers, and journalists debated not only Diddy's actions, but the broader implications. Could fame bend justice? Were federal prisons failing at the highest levels? Was this a singular breach or a systemic failure? Inside, Diddy's attorney attempted to navigate the aftermath, but the legal options were gone. No appeal, no reduction, no leniency. The sentence was life, effective immediately. The only path forward was through it. Diddy himself remained mute. His eyes, red-rimmed and weary, stared blankly ahead as he walked back through the facility. Memories of past freedom, past triumphs, past choices, all collided in a whirlwind of regret and disbelief. He had lived decades in the public eye, yet none of that prepared him for this. Not the lawsuits, not the tabloids, not the press conferences, nothing. And the leak itself remained a mystery. Who filmed the videos? Who sent them to TMZ? Was it a guard, an inmate, a contractor, someone with access to restricted areas? Internal investigations were underway, but answers were elusive. Every officer felt the pressure of suspicion. Every hallway carried whispers. Every glance was measured, cautious. By evening, national news had dissected every detail. Panelists debated, could Diddy's fame have contributed to this leniency initially? Did the leaks expose him to stricter scrutiny? Legal experts noted the unprecedented nature of a sentence increase triggered by public pressure and leaked footage. This is extraordinary, one analyst had said. The court has rarely, if ever, responded this decisively to social media outrage and leaked prison footage. Inside Fort Dix, Diddy was escorted back to a new cell, one chosen specifically for high-risk, high-profile inmates under constant observation. Every corner had a camera, every movement logged, every visit monitored. And yet, even with security tightened, whispers of the leaks traveled faster than the guards could contain. Inmates stared, guards whispered, and rumors spiraled into myth. For Diddy, this was more than confinement. This was the realization that his life, his freedom, his influence, everything he had taken for granted, was gone. The videos, just seconds long, had rewritten reality. A slip of a jacket, a glance, a secretive gesture. And now those moments were immortalized as the reason for life imprisonment. The following morning, the media frenzy escalated further. Television crews camped outside Fort Dix. Online news tickers scrolled nonstop. Diddy life sentence after prison video leak. Interviews with former inmates, legal experts, and political analysts flooded the airwaves. In the midst of all this, the Federal Bureau of Prisons released a brief statement. We are conducting an internal investigation into the unauthorized video footage. All necessary security measures are being reviewed. Further updates will be provided as they become available. A statement, sterile and controlled, meant to calm a storm that no statement could touch. By now, the story had reached global attention. Fans, critics, and the public debated endlessly. Some were outraged at Diddy, some were fascinated, some sympathized. But everyone knew one thing: the leaked videos had changed history. And for Diddy, there was no going back. The morning after the life sentence ruling, Fort Dix was tense in ways no one had seen before. Every officer, every supervisor, every inmate could feel the invisible pressure. The facility felt like a powder keg. One wrong word, one misstep, and the storm could ignite internally. Inside Diddy's new high-security cell, he sat silently on the cold metal bench. Chains had been removed, but observation cameras captured every twitch, every blink, every sigh. The walls were gray, bare, and oppressive, a stark reminder of what the leaked videos had wrought. Outside, the investigation into the source of the leak had intensified. Internal affairs descended like a silent army, reviewing logs, checking timestamps, interrogating every guard who had any connection to the media library or the chapel corridor. Questions were asked, answers were cross-referenced, alibis scrutinized, and fingerprints checked on doors, desks, and equipment. Every officer felt the heat. Trust eroded, suspicion ruled. Nobody knew who might have filmed the videos. Was it a disgruntled guard? A clever inmate with access? Someone external with connections? Every scenario carried potential disaster, and the tension inside Fort Dix was nearly unbearable. Meanwhile, the public frenzy only grew. By noon, Diddy's life sentence dominated headlines across the globe. Video leaks lead to life sentence. Fort Dix prison scandal shocks nation. Public outrage triggers unprecedented punishment. Social media was relentless. Analysts dissected the leaks frame by frame, replayed gestures, body language, and movement. Conspiracy theories ran rampant. Someone was helping Diddy. Someone had a hidden agenda. Someone wanted him exposed. Every comment section was a battlefield of suspicion, anger, and speculation. Inside the prison, Diddy's cellmates whispered about the ruling. Life, one muttered. From videos, another questioned. No one spoke directly to him. The aura of fear and fascination surrounded him like a fog. Inmates saw him differently now, not just as a high-profile celebrity, but as someone untouchable in notoriety and simultaneously vulnerable in circumstance. By mid-afternoon, Fort Dix had initiated a full lockdown. All movements were logged, all contact restricted, all external communications monitored. Anyone who had been near the media library or the chapel corridor in the past 2 weeks was questioned, and security cameras were reviewed with new scrutiny. But the leaked source remained elusive. Despite thorough checks, nothing concrete surfaced. CCTV footage was missing frames, electronic logs had anomalies, and key staff were unaccounted for at critical times. Every lead seemed to evaporate. For Diddy, time slowed inside the gray walls. He replayed the moment in the courtroom endlessly in his mind. The judge's calm voice. The words, "This court hereby increases your sentence to life imprisonment, effective immediately." The marshal's firm grip. The chilling silence of the room. Outside, federal prosecutors were strategizing. They wanted answers. They wanted accountability. They wanted the prison system to regain credibility. Meetings were held with internal investigators, warden representatives, and legal teams, all to trace the leak that had sparked a national crisis. At the same time, news outlets pursued every angle. Panel discussions debated whether Diddy's fame initially allowed him privileges inside the prison, and if those privileges indirectly led to the leaks. Experts argued that this was not just a celebrity scandal, it was a cautionary tale of systemic vulnerability, of oversight failure, of security breaches that could never be ignored. By evening, Diddy had been placed under 24-hour observation, a protocol reserved for high-profile inmates posing both security and political risk. Every footstep, every movement, every whisper in his vicinity was logged. Marshals rotated shifts, ensuring that no lapse would repeat the mistakes captured in the leaked videos. The leaked videos had done more than end a sentence. They had changed the way Fort Dix operated forever. Prison routines were rewritten, access points fortified, and monitoring intensified. Staff morale was low. Fear and suspicion dominated. Inmates sensed the shift, feeling both the increased scrutiny and the heightened tension in every corner. For Diddy, the psychological toll was immediate. He had lost more than freedom. He had lost control. In the quiet of his cell, he realized that those few seconds of leaked footage had irrevocably altered his life, his legacy, and his future. No lawyer could appeal this ruling. No PR campaign could reverse it. No public statement could mend the damage. And as night fell over Fort Dix, a new storm was forming behind the walls. The federal investigation into the leak itself. Because as much as the world focused on Diddy, the real question haunting everyone inside was, who dared to film him? The answer could destroy careers, ruin lives, or ignite another scandal even bigger than the one already shaking the nation. The days following the life sentence ruling became a maelstrom inside Fort Dix. Every corridor, every office, every camera corner felt charged with tension. The administration was on edge, and whispers of blame ricocheted through the halls like a storm. Internal affairs intensified their investigation. Logs were cross-checked repeatedly. Every officer who had access to restricted areas was interrogated, sometimes for hours at a time. Questions became sharper, the tone sterner. Some officers flinched under scrutiny, others tried to deflect, but suspicion touched everyone. The warden held emergency briefings twice a day. Who filmed him? Who leaked it? He demanded, voice low, but cutting through the tension. We have to know, for this escalates further. Public pressure isn't fading. The court isn't forgiving. We are on borrowed time. Cameras were reviewed frame by frame. A guard's glance, a shadow moving differently, a door slightly ajar, every minor detail became a potential lead. But nothing concrete surfaced. Every apparent clue dissolved under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Diddy's presence in the high-security wing reshaped the prison ecosystem. Inmates whispered about the videos and the ruling. Some feared him, some envied him, some simply watched with morbid fascination. Even guards altered their routines when near his cell, hyper-aware of potential breaches or interactions. Psychologically, the pressure on Diddy was immense. He was no longer just serving time. He was a symbol, a cautionary tale, and a living headline. The reality of a life sentence began sinking in layer by layer, hour by hour. Every movement became measured. Every glance calculated. Every sound in the cell seemed amplified. Outside the walls, the investigation's ripple effect continued. Senators and federal officials demanded updates on the leak. National news outlets ran constant segments analyzing the videos anew. The framing, the angles, the shadows, the body language, all dissected as if a second exposure could make sense of a system that had already failed. Inside Fort Dix, paranoia had seeped into every interaction. Even the most loyal staff now questioned colleagues. Officers who had worked together for decades eyed each other warily. "Could it have been you?" one whispered to another in a hallway. Silence was the answer more often than not. Diddy, meanwhile, tried to remain composed, but small cracks appeared. In the high security cell, he would sometimes sit silently, staring at the gray walls for hours. He thought of the courtroom. The judge's cold, deliberate voice echoed in his mind. "This court hereby increases your sentence to life imprisonment, effective immediately." Every time he replayed the memory, the weight of the sentence sank deeper. It wasn't just the loss of freedom, it was the public exposure, the humiliation, the understanding that millions had watched him falter, move, and, by the court's interpretation, fail to comply with the system. By the third day after the ruling, Fort Dix had implemented stricter internal measures. No officer could be alone in restricted zones. Every entry and exit was logged with multiple confirmations. Surveillance coverage was doubled, even in areas that had never been considered sensitive. But tension wasn't limited to logistics. Rumors of an insider with a personal vendetta spread like wildfire. Was it an officer with grudges, an inmate seeking leverage, someone external exploiting a weak system? No one knew, and that uncertainty was the most dangerous force in the facility. Diddy, for his part, became increasingly aware of the invisible eyes. He felt watched in every moment of stillness, every glance outside his cell, every shuffle of shoes in the corridor, every cough or whisper could have a motive. He knew that the leaked videos hadn't just punished him. They had turned Fort Dix into a pressure cooker, and he was at its center. Meanwhile, the warden realized a hard truth. The prison had to repair its credibility before it could function normally again. Staff training intensified. Entry protocols became stricter. Random audits were conducted in shifts. Yet with all these measures, the question remained, who had filmed Diddy and why? For Diddy, nights became the hardest. He would lie awake listening to distant footsteps, the faint hum of security cameras, and the occasional clang of metal doors. The life sentence loomed over him like a storm cloud. He knew that the leak was still out there, somewhere, unanswered, unresolved. It could be discovered at any time, reigniting public outrage, reopening scrutiny, and further destabilizing the fragile order inside the prison. The psychological toll became visible, hands trembling as he held a cup, eyes darting toward corridors where no one stood. Conversations stopped mid-thought as he imagined unseen observers. Yet, despite it all, Diddy had to survive the new reality. High security routines dictated his every move. Meals, recreation, medical checks, even showers were monitored. The videos had ensured that leniency was gone forever. And as the federal investigation continued beyond the prison walls, one thing became clear to everyone involved. The leak had not just punished a man. It had exposed the fragility of the system. It had shaken Fort Dix to its core, and it had created a tension that would not dissipate until the source was found, or until it erupted into another scandal, potentially even larger than the first. The silence inside Diddy's cell was deafening. The echoes of those two leaked videos, of public outrage, and of the courtroom ruling reverberated endlessly. He was alone, yet endlessly observed. He was free to move inside a cell, yet trapped by consequences far beyond its walls. And deep inside, he knew that his life, as he had once known it, was gone forever. The weeks following Diddy's life sentence were a slow, grinding storm. Inside Fort Dix, the prison had transformed into a fortress. Every corner, every hallway, every angle was scrutinized. Officers moved with precise coordination, as if even a second of distraction could trigger another scandal. And then the investigation broke. Internal Affairs finally uncovered the source of the leak. It wasn't an inmate. It wasn't a rogue officer in the usual sense. It was someone with calculated access, someone who had carefully planned every step. A mid-level administrative worker who had grown frustrated with Fort Dix's management, who had felt overlooked and powerless, had filmed Diddy and released the footage anonymously to TMZ. The revelation shocked everyone. The worker was arrested and interrogated. Evidence, emails, security badge logs, timestamps from cameras painted a full picture of premeditation. It was not just a leak. It was a deliberate act to expose a perceived corruption in the prison system. For Diddy, the confirmation of the source brought no relief. If anything, it magnified the isolation. He hadn't orchestrated this. He hadn't asked for it. Yet he bore the consequences fully, enduring a life sentence that hung over him like a shadow, a direct result of someone else's intentions. Fort Dix, meanwhile, faced a reckoning. The warden resigned amid criticism. Security protocols were overhauled. Congress demanded a federal review. National news outlets ran repeated segments detailing the administrative failures, and the prison's reputation was scarred for years. Inside the prison, Diddy's existence changed in subtle ways. He was transferred to the highest security unit. Movement was limited. Meals were delivered in shifts. Recreational time was restricted. Conversations were closely monitored. Every action was documented, but in the quiet moments he reflected. He thought of the courtroom, of Judge Subramanian's cold, decisive words. This court hereby increases your sentence to life imprisonment, effective immediately. He thought of the two videos that had altered the course of his life forever. Yet despite the fear, the shame, and the isolation, a new clarity began to emerge. Diddy realized that the only thing he could control now was his response. He could not undo the leaks. He could not change the ruling. He could not alter the public perception. All he could do was survive, adapt, and endure. Weeks turned into months. The media continued to cover the aftermath sporadically, but the initial frenzy faded. Public outrage shifted to other headlines. Yet inside Fort Dix, the impact of those seconds of leaked video continued to reverberate. Officers were reminded daily of how fragile the system could be. Every inmate, every visitor, every staff member was a living reminder of the breach and its consequences. For Diddy, life became a matter of routine, discipline, and survival. He learned to navigate the new restrictions with a measured calm. He engaged in prison programs, reading, fitness, and mentoring younger inmates. The spotlight was gone, but the lessons were permanent. There were moments of reflection, moments of regret, and moments of resignation. He understood that fame, wealth, and influence had once provided a sense of invincibility outside the prison walls. Inside, it meant nothing. Only adherence to rules, only endurance, only resilience mattered. And yet, in the quiet, he sometimes allowed himself a private thought. That the leaks, the scandal, the life sentence, it had all changed him. It had stripped away illusions. It had revealed fragility, vulnerability, and a raw truth about consequence. Eventually, Fort Dix began to stabilize. The prison learned from its mistakes. Security tightened, staff were retrained, oversight became stricter. Yet the legacy of those leaked videos remained. A cautionary tale for the federal system, for high-profile inmates, and for anyone who underestimated the power of a few seconds captured on camera. Diddy moved forward cautiously. His world had ended in one courtroom, but in another sense, it had begun anew. A life sentence was no longer just a punishment. It was a challenge, a reality, and a test of endurance. And as he settled into the rhythm of the highest security wing, Diddy understood the weight he carried. He had been exposed, judged, and sentenced by the system, and by millions of eyes that had watched those videos, dissected every movement, and rendered judgment before the court ever spoke. He had lost freedom, comfort, and the life he once knew. But in that loss, he found a stark, undeniable clarity. Survival, resilience, and the slow, deliberate acceptance of consequences would now define every day of his existence. The prison walls no longer simply confined him. They defined the new reality of his life. And within those walls, Diddy would endure fully, and endure silently. The two leaked videos, mere seconds long, had rewritten everything. They had taken a man who had once controlled industries and influence and transformed him into a symbol of systemic vulnerability, personal consequence, and unyielding public scrutiny. And in the end, nothing would ever be the same.